If you caught my video last week on the premiere episode of Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 1, That Hope Is You, then I might have touched on this a little bit, but if you didn't catch that video, well, here goes. This is going to be about Michael Burnham. You might have seen that in the title, but yes, it will be about the Michael Burnham. She is Michael Burnham. So I've been making the rounds across the Star Trek universe, vlogging universe, and just to see what many people have to say about the new season of Star Trek Discovery. And it's the usual stuff. A lot of people are skeptical. Many people still express dismay at the show, and more specifically, Michael Burnham, played by Sonequa Martin Green. And many people were not happy to see her in the first episode, to see her face. You know, the typical joke is that it's Star Trek Burnham instead of Star Trek Discovery. And I've been trying to assess why so many people don't like this character, and I've heard the gamut of it. I've heard the main reason given is that she's a Mary Sue, and that she's the center of every single narrative and plot of the show so far, which is true. I can contend with that, but even with her being a Mary Sue, I just don't understand how or why this character is seen as so political. So I decided to look into it a little bit. I want to be fair because I understand that we live in a society right now where you're either with us or you're with the terrorist. And many people don't want to hear the R word or the S or M word, sexist, misogynistic, and the R word, of course, for you dullards, racist. But I think it's a little complex than that. You know, I understand the Mary Sue aspect of Michael Burnham, but it's also important to note that I can't help but feel personally as a Black woman as well that a lot of that is unjustified. It's kind of almost like, I don't know. For me, I feel, you know, we still live in a white male dominant society, and we still live in a society in fandom spaces. Star Trek spaces are still dominated by white males, and to be blunt about it, Black women are not really welcome in these spaces. By that I mean, in a white male dominant society, Black women are at best tolerated, and which is indistinguishable from, say, being ignored and dismissed. And at worst, we are attacked and treated with antagonism. Usually that happens if we pass our place. See, if we dare to be seen and heard and not sit quietly in the background or just not say anything. And that's when we are subjected to attacks. White men, quite frankly, just don't care about Black women in more ways than one. So looking at the Michael Burnham hate, I have to wonder how much of it is rooted in that sort of anti-Black women, I don't want to say racism, but hatred. Is it a case where Burnham is just too much all at once for many white men who are not used to seeing or caring about Black women, and now they must see and care about a Black woman, but that Black woman is hard to ignore? You know, it's one thing to make a Black female the main character on a show that belongs to a series that is largely built around white men with a largely white male following. It's another thing to make that character a Mary Sue. So looking at the role of Black women in Star Trek, and more specifically the ones that have appeared on camera, going back to the original series of TOS, I've mentioned in a few of my videos that what my feelings are about Lieutenant Uhura. She's a rock star, and she took it for the team. You know, there's that famous story about how Martin Luther King had talked her into staying on the show because she wanted to leave, feeling that she didn't have anything to do. And she stayed on the show to represent the face of a black person in the future, and for that we love her. But Lieutenant Uhura, from a series standpoint, was just a background actor. She had little or nothing to do in the show, and she was largely marginalized. And once they went into season 2, she was even further marginalized as the show became about Kirk, Spock, and many white fans, they don't care. You know, she's in the background. They don't have to care about her. They can dismiss her, and they can push her aside. Then if you go on to, say, Star Trek The Next Generation, you have Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, who is a character who is a recurring character, but weirdly has more to do with the series than, say, Lieutenant Uhura had to do with her series, TOS. Guinan is this kind of immortal woman from a dying or long gone race, and she mainly serves as an advisor to Captain Picard. I've heard many suggested that she's kind of a better written version of Deanna Troi, which might be true, since Deanna Troi's original role was to be an advisor to Picard, and she then became the ship's counselor. But Guinan became Picard's real advisor, and she only appears in a handful of episodes. The two most Guinan focused or centered episodes were perhaps Yesterday's Enterprise, where she became the character to inform the audience that something was very wrong here, and also the one who informs the crew that something is very wrong here. She also appeared in a 2-part time traveling episode. Why can't I remember that title right now? It's not Futures Past, is it? Anyway, she also appeared in the 2-part time travel episode, where, you know, the one where they discovered Data's head, and discovered it had been there for over 200 years, and then they time traveled to the past, and Guinan played a major role. But besides those 2 major episodes, she doesn't really appear in the series all that much. So even though she has an interesting character and role, she appears in small doses, similar to Lieutenant Uhura, but she probably spoke more words, at least more interesting words, than Lieutenant Uhura ever did during her time on TOS. I know I'm mainly focusing on the shows because I know people will mention Alfre Woodard in the TNG movie First Contact, where she was the female lead in the movie, and apparently that was from the urging of Patrick Stewart. So Patrick, you're a god for doing that. But I'm mainly focusing on the TV shows. So the next TV show was Voyager, and I cannot think of any black women featured prominently on Voyager, so we can jump past that. The next the next TV series is Deep Space Nine. Of course, Deep Space Nine had Cisco, who's the black captain, and his son. But the only black female character on that show who was featured prominently, I wouldn't even say prominently, is Cassidy Yates, who is Cisco's girlfriend and later wife. And she is also a recurring character, and her role is not that significant. In fact, there was one storyline that centered her, but did not center on her. So this was the storyline about whether or not she's a Maquis spy. So looking back on all the series, black women appeared in small doses, and rarely they were either impactful in small doses like Guinan, or they were just kind of there like Lieutenant Uhura. But they were never featured prominently in any capacity, certainly not in a way that was integral to the storyline, or in a way that many white men would have a problem with. No, they were never the center of any narratives. And the best comparison then for Michael Burnham would be Beckett Mariner in Star Trek Lower Decks. Beckett Mariner is, as I've seen this written, she is a better written version of Michael Burnham. And like Burnham, she's a black female lead on a Star Trek series. Beckett Mariner, however, is not a Mary Sue. And this is interesting because I watch a lot of these same critics who don't like Michael Burnham. They went into Lower Decks being skeptical of Beckett Mariner and believing, oh, it's Michael Burnham 2.0, only to come out of it defending Beckett Mariner against accusations that she's just like Michael Burnham. As they've said, she's a better written version of Michael Burnham, maybe what Michael Burnham should have been. So Beckett Mariner is the main character without actually being the center point of every single plot. And that's probably the best way to write a main character. If you look at Star Trek Season 1, Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Michael Burnham is the one who triggered the plot. If you look at Star Trek Discovery Season 2, it doesn't work without Michael Burnham since she is literally the Red Angel. But Beckett Mariner is a main character who does not have the same kind of struggles that Burnham has in finding people to like her. And she is on a show with another black female character played by Dawn Lewis, her mother. So Beckett Mariner is the closest I can think of when it comes to Michael Burnham. And this is why it's a little bit hard. I know many people will say, well, Beckett Mariner is an animated character. She is, but she is a black female character and she is the lead of a Star Trek show. So is Michael Burnham. And many of these same critics who don't like Michael Burnham like Beckett Mariner. Which makes it a little bit hard to say then that it's racism. Why Beckett Mariner and why? But why not Michael Burnham? I know there are many people who will bring up Cisco and blah, 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 but these are black male characters and it's not the same as a black female character. White men, generally speaking, have always found use for black men, especially even in spaces that are hyper masculine. A female behaving the same way as a male in a hyper masculine situation or space is viewed differently. And for black women, being black just kind of adds to a lot of that criticism. And so I'm really here just trying to understand why the hatred for Michael Burnham. And all I can think is it's a combination of two things. I think that it's a combination of one, not being used to black women in spaces that are dominated by white males. And two, having Michael Burnham be the center plot, the Mary Sue of the story doesn't help. So I think, having Michael Burnham as the main character, okay. Having Michael Burnham at the center of every single plot, not okay. And the combination of these two things it's a lot for many white men to deal with, especially since they're not used to dealing with black women. At best, they ignore black women or tolerate them in small quantities. That's at best. At worst, here they have a black woman who is front and center of every single narrative within this show and who they cannot ignore. So it might be a lot for them to be forced to care about someone that they're not used to being forced to care about. And what's worse, it's not like other black female characters where they can ignore them or, push them aside and focus on other characters. Michael Burnham is front and center of everything. So even though the character is not political, being black doesn't make you political. She is in fact seen as, and she does receive a lot of antagonism. I think the Vulcan aspect doesn't help because Vulcans are not, interesting in and of themselves. Spock was, but many other Vulcans are not. Tuvok, for example, was dull, and T'Pol wasn't interesting either, and they never made them interesting. So given Michael Burnham that Vulcan plotline didn't work, and many people were peeved by that since it kind of dumped on canon, at least what we thought we knew about Spock. But going back to the point, I think Michael Burnham may represent too much of a black woman all at once for many of these white males in fandom. It's one thing when a black female is the lead on a Star Trek show, which is overwhelmingly white male and overwhelmingly historically catered to white males. But it's another thing when that black female is the center of the plot. Which means, I mean, you can be the lead without being the center of every single plot. You look at Picard, for example, if you remove him from his own show, the plot still stands. It's harder to do that with Michael Burnham. You remove her and the plot falls apart. Going forward for Star Trek Discovery Season 3, I'm hoping that Michael Burnham is not the savior of the future. I mean, she literally flew in as an angel to the future where the Federation doesn't exist. You know, and I'm hoping they learn and not that they tone her down. The character for me can be salvaged, and she needs not be a Mary Sue chosen one. But that just depends on the filmmakers. But unfortunately, I think what has been happening is the filmmakers have been conflating hatred for Michael Burnham with racism. And this has allowed them to dismiss decent and objective criticism of the way the show has been made and the type of stories and plots. The criticism of Michael Burnham has allowed many of the showrunners to dismiss a lot of the legitimate and valid objective criticism about the way the show has been handled, which is unfortunate. But anyway, I just wanted to address some of the Michael Burnham hate. I don't think Michael Burnham is innately a bad character. I understand that she is written as a Mary Sue. I've always said that. But it doesn't mean I hate this character. I just think she needs to be toned down. Anyway, this has been another rant from me. Let me know what you think, and going forward, what your thoughts are about the hatred of Michael Burnham. Oh, and by the way, I spent the last week on Twitter essentially correcting a bunch of white male critics about Michael Burnham's hair. Many of them seem confused as to how she has long braids and how she could have grown hair that long. And this is absurd, of course, because she's actually wearing braids, and it looks like in the promo for episode 3, we will see why she has these. We will see the changing of her hair, so hopefully that will answer a few questions about her braids. And I'm still a little bit surprised, but in a good way, that braids exist 1,000 years into the future, in the 32nd century. But hey, you know, Star Trek is reflecting the current time we live in, not 1,000+ years from now. So woohoo, that's cool, braids exist. Anyway, let me know what you think. Subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to thumbs this video way up. And I'll talk to you next time.